What's up, audio fam? This is CJ with Prodigy Creations. If you've ever been confused between what the difference between mixing and mastering is, trust me, you're not the only one. Whenever I was first getting into music production, they both seemed to be pretty much the same thing, and I didn't really understand what the difference was. But, I'm happy to say that as I've continued learning and continued growing in music, I'm able to understand the difference, and I'm here to explain to you what the difference is. So, if you're new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I have a website, prodigycreationsnow.com. If you're interested in checking it out today, I've got a free ebook for you. It's called The Simple Guide to Recording Music Now in 5 Steps or Less. If you're totally new to music and need some sort of reference to building your home studio, go ahead and go to prodigycreationsnow.com. And you will see a place to enter in your email address for the free ebook. Once you do that, it's going to be sent to your inbox within minutes, and you'll be one step closer to making music. But for today, there's also blog content there, by the way. I'm starting to write more blog articles on the website, so if you're a reader, definitely go ahead and check out more content there. But for today, we're going to discuss the difference between mixing versus mastering. And so let's go ahead and dive into my computer and get it started. Alright friends, so here I've got pulled up a mixing session for one of my older songs called Mountains. And ideally when you're making a track, you want to have 3 separate phases. And that would be producing, so that's when you're, in the creative stage, making all of the instruments do their thing, putting them all together. And once you're done with that, that's ideally when you would enter the mixing phase. Sometimes when you're producing, you mix as you go, and there's nothing wrong with that. But ideally, when you're really mixing a song, you're going to have all of your production done. So that's the case here. I've got all of my instruments, as you can see, on its own individual channel. And that's important in mixing, because that's pretty much what it's all about, is taking all of these unique and independent sounds and trying to make them blend together so that they make up one song, a pleasant listening experience. And of course you do this through volume. You see all of the different faders set at their unique setting. You do it through EQ if it's needed. You don't necessarily need to EQ every channel, but if it does need it, you'd apply EQ, which helps to shape and craft the tone. This guitar has a delay on it. Mixing is just, there's actually no compression going on here, surprisingly. But, compression obviously is also another thing you can add during the mixing phase. But yeah, as you can see in this view as well, every instrument has its own unique channel, and we're just trying to find the balance between it all. Let me go ahead and play you a little sample. So that's basically what mixing is. You are taking all of the individual tracks and trying to make some sort of sense between all of them. Just trying to find that perfect balance between all of them so that the song as a whole sounds good. Okay, friends, and this is an example of what a mastering session would look like. And as the saying goes, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So, the way I'm showing you may look a lot different than what the next producer may show you. But essentially, when you are entering the mastering phase, it's way more big picture than mixing. As I said, when you're mixing, you're adjusting each individual track so that they blend together. But when you're entering the mastering phase, this is actually when you are done mixing. So you save your mix as an individual audio file, which is what this is right here. I called it pre-master. That's just a term I like to use when I'm entering the mastering phase. But it's basically a single mix. So when you're mastering, you're using similar tools. As you can see, I've got an EQ and a compressor down here. So you're using the same tools as mixing. You're just using them differently. When you're mixing, you can make more extreme settings because, again, you're just trying to find that balance between everything. There's a lot of moving parts in mixing. And so you're trying to find that balance, whatever it may take. But when you're mastering, the mix is done. Everything that you've done in the mixing phase is right here. In fact, let me just take off all these effects. So this is the mix, and this is what I will have to work with during the mastering phase. Right, it's just on one audio file. What I hear is what I get. And so now the goal is to make it sound as best as possible. And the best way to do this is by getting a reference track. So you would just find a song that is very closely related to the genre of your specific track. So in this case, Mountains, it's a very lo-fi sound. And so I went to the internet and got YWS Snowman. It's a great, great lo-fi track. Highly recommend it if you haven't heard it before, by the way. But what I'm trying to do, since I know this song has already been, through all of the phases, through production, mixing, and mastering, since I know that, and since I know it's a pretty popular song for its genre, what I'm doing is I'm using it as a reference to change or amplify, basically, my mix. Let me show you what I mean. At first, I'm going to go ahead and turn down the reference track a little bit because at first, I'm not worried with volume. At first. We will get there. But at first, we're just going to flip in between my track or your track and just flip between it a couple times, listening to try to tell the difference and then making adjustments from there. So let's go ahead and skip to maybe right here. Here we go. Let's just take a listen to both of them. Try to spot what we can do. Even turn it down a little bit more because I don't want to be influenced by the volume necessarily right yet. Okay, so the first thing I did was I added an EQ, and since we are dealing with the track as a whole, you don't really want to make extreme settings when you're mastering. So as you can see, I did boost a little bit of 95 hertz because I did feel that my reference track had much more low end, so I was trying to accommodate that for my track. But I didn't do too much. Again, when you're mastering, you're not just affecting one thing anymore like you are in mixing. When I'm mixing, I can adjust the kick drum. I could have boosted more low end in that if I wanted to, or the bass, obviously. And I could have went, 7 dB or whatever I wanted to do because it's mixing. But when you're mastering, again, you're affecting everything. When I'm boosting the 95 hertz on the master, I'm boosting everything in that song. So you just want to be more subtle in the mastering phase. That's why I've only, didn't even hit 2 dB in this instance. I also carved out some frequencies that I thought sounded weird around 337 hertz. Took out about a decibel of that, a little more. And I added some mid-range too, just to give it a little bit more pop, more sizzle, I guess. I did go a little bit farther this time, but still it was under 3 dB. Just be sure to make very, very subtle moves as best you can. And then from here, you can also add a compressor. I did add the SSL bus compressor. So let me show you before and after that. just adding a little bit more presence, a little bit more punch to the track. And I'll say it again, there's more than one way to skin a cat. This isn't necessarily something you have to do when mastering, but we all have our own unique things we like to do, be it mixing or mastering. And sometimes I like to add the Greg Wells Mixcentric to my master. And it's almost like cheating, if I'm being honest, because you're just adjusting input-output levels. But other than that, you're literally just adjusting this knob. And that's basically it. A lot is going on under the hood of this plugin, but it really does add a nice polish to your mix or master or whatever you're doing. So here's a little before and after comparison of that as well. If you would like more info on this particular plugin, I have made a video about it, so I'll go ahead and make sure to link to that if you're interested. But the final phase that you want to do in the mastering process is adding a limiter. And this is just a stock limiter in Ableton. Very simple, but it works great. And so now I'm going to go to my reference track, set it back to 0, because now we are concerned about the volume. Obviously we were more focused on shaping the right tone and all that, getting the dynamics right. But now with the limiter, we are focused on making it sound on par with this reference track as far as volume goes. And a limiter is basically just a very, very extreme compressor. When you set your ceiling, this is telling it, hey, don't go past this point. And in digital audio, you almost never want to go past 0. And I say almost because, rules are meant to be broken sometimes. But in mastering, I would say you don't want it to go past 0 dB at all. Because in digital audio, when you go past 0 dB, it causes clipping, which is basically just nasty sounding distortion. Not good distortion, like with electric guitars, but just not good sounding. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So technically you could set this to 0, and ideally it shouldn't cross that threshold. But me, I don't know, I'm just a little bit conservative, I guess. So I put it down even a little bit lower at minus 0.10 or 11, just to make sure it does not clip at all. So we have that adjusted. But we also want it to make it sound louder. It's not all about keeping it below the threshold, but it's also about bringing more volume into it. And so obviously you would go back and forth between listen and adjust the gain. So I've already done it obviously, but let me go ahead and show you a live example of it. Here we go. There we go. That's basically a mastering session done. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to sound exactly like your reference track, because that's what it's for. It's just there for reference. We all have our own unique way of doing things. Don't sweat it sounding exactly like the reference track, because it's not going to. Obviously, it's a different track. But at the same time, it's important to have a reference track so that you can have a reference to how your song needs to sound before you release it. And so basically, that is how you would mix. If this were going to be a single release, that's pretty much all I would need to do. And here's a little before and after comparison. As you can see here, I'll make this even bigger. This is the single mix, and then this is the mastered version of the track. So as you can see, much bigger waveforms. And it's more closer to this as well. So that's pretty much how you would master a single. Now, if I were to master an EP, let's say, which this was an EP, Mountains and Oceans were both on the same EP together. And so when you're doing an EP, mastering an EP, you want to keep all of your other tracks in mind as well. You know, when you're mastering a single, it's just one and done. You don't have to worry about it. Just that and your reference track is all you need. But when you're doing an EP, you want to also have a consistent sound across your EP. And, you know, your mixes, as weird as it may sound, your mixes may sound a lot different from one another. And so I think it's also important to keep your reference track in here when you start on the next one. Oceans, this is already a master, but this is just, you know, just an example. Let's say I was mastering Oceans and then I had my previous track, Mountains, have the master here. So now I'm flipping between a master I've already done, a master I'm working on now, and of course the reference track. And just trying to find that perfect balance between all of it. But yeah, that is basically the difference between mixing and mastering, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend. I hope you found this video helpful today. If you'd be interested in checking out more additional content, be sure to visit prodigycreationsnow.com. Again, I do have additional blog articles that you can learn from exclusively on the website. And if you are new to music, I just want to remind you that I do have a free downloadable PDF guide for you called The Simple Guide to Recording Music Now in 5 Steps or Less. And this will be a very easy, a very practical guide for you to read to know how to build your first home studio and to get started making music. But that's all for today, friends. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit subscribe to join my audio fam. I'd love to have you around more often. If you have any questions or comments about the video, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll try to get back to you. But other than that, this is CJ with Prodigy Creations. And again, thank you so much for joining me today. See you in the next one.